For my final project, I related psychologists' ideas to books that we read. The first example was Abraham Maslow, and his theory was the hierarchy of needs. And I related that to Gilgamesh because the hierarchy of needs was pretty much just the basic needs. And I talked about how when Enkidu acted like an animal, all he needed was to drink water and eat grass, and that was his basic needs. And that was physiological. And for safety, he was strong because that was for his own safety. And for belonging and love, when Enkidu died, his brother acted like that, like as a wild animal, and that was just because he missed him and loved him. For the second person, it was Sigmund Freud, and he talked about ID, ego, and superego. And the book I related that to was A Streetcar Named Desire. So the ID is like the primitive and instinctual parts of the mind that contain sexual and aggressive drives. And the example from that was, I used Stanley, how he's been compared to an animal, and he gets really aggressive and he rapes Blanche. The superego is the moral conscious, and I talked about how after the fights Stanley and Blanche have, Stanley ends up feeling bad. And for ego, that's the part between the two, between superego and ID. And I said, the example was at the end when I used Blanche at the example because at the end, she realizes everyone knows about her lies. The next person is Lawrence Kohlberg, and he talked about pre-conventional, conventional, and post-conventional. So pre-conventional is pretty much like challenging the rules. Conventional is like you go with it, but you don't agree with it. And post-conventional is go with what's justice and right, and you kind of create your own. So the book I used was Anthem, and I talked about how equality 7-2521, he fits all three of them. For conventional, that's when you challenge the rules. He didn't agree with what was happening and what's normal for them, which is just having the same job for your whole life. So he did something about it, and he ended up going off on his own. And that's where it leads to post-conventional, because he kind of made his own little like community, and he was gonna have people go there and have their own rules and what he believes. And for conventional, that was like in the middle when he agreed with it. When he didn't agree with it, but he still went with it because he had no other choice. And for Howard Gardner, he had all 8 different ways, and the first way is visual and spatial, and I related this to A Streetcar Named Desire. So for visual spatial, it was Stanley, an example of visual spatial intelligence, because he was on to Blanche the whole time. He knew exactly what she was trying to do, and he didn't believe her about her lying. The next type is linguistic verbal intelligence. In this example, I used Blanche. She's very good at getting people to believe her stories. She's not perfect, but she's pretty good at keeping up with her lies. For logical mathematical intelligence, this example talks about problem solving. So I use Stanley because he seems to have a good way with solving problems. And bodily kinetic intelligence talks about the physical strength. So I use Stanley again, talks about, because I know he does physical activities such as bowling, and he also gets aggressive with many people, like Blanche, and he seems to be strong. And for musical intelligence, I talked about the music that they used in the book, how they used the polka to represent certain things, like when Blanche talks about her ex-husband who killed himself, and they used like music like that to like set a tone. And interpersonal intelligence is Stella's a good example for that, because she is understanding, especially to her sister. When there was a conflict, Stanley just went to her and was very aggressive and questioned her, but her sister, she was just very calm and talked to her about it. For intrapersonal intelligence, Stanley's a good example for this because he has great self-awareness. He knew exactly what was going on around him, especially when Blanche came and started lying. He knew exactly what she was doing. And lastly is naturalistic intelligence. And the only logical connection for this I could make is the doctor, because it talked about stuff like biology, and the only categories that really relate to that in some way is something with like medical, or in this case, just being the doctor.